Good evening, I'm David Kramer with Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website, weather.gov/Alaska. You can get any updates to the forecast or check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we might have out for your area. You can also call our weather info line, 1-885-937-4977. Get any updates to the forecast through that means as well. Taking a look at some of the hazards that we do expect to be out for the state, starting in southwest Alaska from Bristol Bay to Kuskokwim Bay, we're expecting to see some stronger winds and higher seas, winds getting up to as high as 30 to 40 knots out of a southwesterly direction. This is going to start Sunday night and go through Monday. That's going to bring the potential for some higher surf and coastal flooding to southwest Alaska. We're also going to see some higher seas from Bristol Bay to Cape Newingham up to 9 to 14 feet, and then 8 to 14 feet north of Cape Newingham. As we move into later Monday and into Tuesday, we do expect these higher surf conditions to progress further north along the west coast of the state. For fire danger, primarily low throughout much of the state. There are still some areas in the central interior and up through the Yukon Flats that are seeing some high and some smaller areas of very high, so keep that in mind. Even though we've had a lot of rain recently, we are still seeing some fire danger, especially in the interior areas. Taking a look at our satellite imagery, we have a couple lows moving through the area that are bringing some rain to Alaska. One of those lows is by the Central Aleutian Islands, bringing rain throughout much of the Aleutians and southern Bering Sea. Another one of those is farther to the east from that first low, bringing its front through the Gulf of Alaska, starting to spread rain throughout the Gulf and areas around the Gulf. And then as we look up the west coast by Seward Peninsula area and up by St. Lawrence Island, we have another low there, bringing some rain to the west coast. And then finally, we can see in the very eastern side of mainland Alaska and the interior, some convection happening out there, starting to bring the potential for some afternoon and evening thunderstorms to the far eastern portions of mainland Alaska. Taking a look at our weather for the remainder of the day, we'll start with our low pressure out by the Central Aleutian Islands. This is bringing rain to the southern Bering and the Central Aleutians throughout the Alaska Peninsula and down into southwest Alaska as well. Another low by Kodiak Island with its front pushing through the Gulf of Alaska is bringing rain through those areas as well as the North Gulf Coast and starting to bring rain to the Panhandle as well. Up in the interior, we do have that area out east for the potential for some afternoon and evening thunderstorms. And as we move back towards the west coast, our low pressure out by the Seward Peninsula is going to bring some rain to areas around the west coast with the potential for some fog as well, especially along the Seward Peninsula. Up along the Arctic coastline, we are going to see a mix of rain and fog, especially as we get nearest to the water. As we move into tonight, we are going to see that rain and fog areas up north lingering along the North Slope coastline, with some isolated rain as we stretch down the remainder of the west coast with that weakening trough that we have over the area from our low that was out by the Seward Peninsula. Our low that was by the Central Aleutians, however, is going to continue to push to the east out by the Eastern Aleutians, bringing rain from the Central Aleutians through the southern Bering and into southwest Alaska, including the Pribilof Islands there. Our other low has moved into the Gulf of Alaska, pushing its front farther to the east and starting to bring heavy rain now to the Panhandle area. Going to see some rain for the North Gulf Coast and starting to extend that into south central Alaska as well, and rain by Kodiak Island as well. In the interior, however, we're going to see conditions drying out a lot tonight. A little bit of rain showers as we get to the western interior, however. As we move into Sunday, still going to see a lot of drier conditions for the central and eastern portions of the interior. But as we get to the west, we're going to see quite a bit of rain along the west coast as our system that was by the eastern Aleutian Islands is starting to push further to the north, bringing in some rain to the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, and all the way up the west coast of the state. Frontal system pushing through the Gulf of Alaska, we are starting to see that rain make it into the North Gulf Coast and rain into the Panhandle as well. Far out to the west, we have high pressure building in, starting to clear out the western Aleutian Islands behind our system that's moving through the eastern Bering. And as we look into Monday, that high pressure will have built out by the central Aleutian Islands, clearing out most of the Aleutians and keeping them fairly dry on Monday. We're still going to have some lingering showers out over the central and northern portion of the Bering Sea. And then our system that was by the eastern portion of the Bering, as it tracked up to the north, this is the system that's going to bring those areas of higher surf to the west coast as it tracks there. So starting later on Sunday, and as it moves through on Monday and eventually onto Tuesday, we are expecting that to bring some of those stronger winds and higher surf on the south side of that low as it moves to the north. This is also going to bring widespread rain on Monday throughout the west coast of the state, pushing into the central portions as well. And as the front pushes through south central Alaska, we are expecting to see rain throughout south central Alaska, the North Gulf Coast, through the Gulf of Alaska, and then central and northern portions of the Panhandle. Taking a look at our temperatures starting Sunday morning, low temps for the Panhandle dropping down into the lower 50s, and then near 50 degrees for much of south central. However, it is going to be a little colder as we move to the more inland locations, getting down to 41 degrees at Glen Allen. Sunday afternoon highs get up into the upper 50s to near 60s for the Panhandle, get up into the lower 60s for much of south central Alaska. And as we move into Monday morning, dropping back down into the lower to mid 50s for the Panhandle, lower to mid 50s also for much of south central Alaska, with 55 degrees at Kodiak and Homer. Monday afternoon highs getting up into the 60s for the Panhandle, a little bit cooler, lower 60s up north, and getting into the mid to upper 60s farther to the south. Up to around 60 degrees for south central Alaska, expected highs Monday afternoon, getting up a little bit warmer in Glen Allen area, up to 66 degrees. In the interior, dropping down into the mid-40s for most of the interior locations, dropping down into the 30s for much of the Arctic coastline, a little bit warmer along the west coast, dropping down into the 40s there. Sunday afternoon highs in the interior, primarily in the mid to upper 60s, some locations, especially out east, getting up into the lower 70s. Along the Arctic coastline, getting up into the 40s out east and into the lower 50s to the west. And we're going to see in the 50s down the west coast as well, a little bit colder by Gamble, 47 degrees there. Monday morning lows in the interior dropping down into the lower 50s and down into the mid 30s along the Arctic coastline, but down the west coast we're going to see temperatures dropping down into the mid to upper 40s. Monday afternoon highs getting up into the 60s in the western interior and then in the mid 70s for the eastern interior. Along the Arctic coastline, primarily around 50 degrees, a little bit warmer as we get farther to the west, and then down the west coast in the lower to mid 50s most locations. Kotzebue going to get a little bit warmer, up to 60 degrees. Down in southwest Alaska, dropping down into the mid to upper 40s, and then into the mid 40s for the Aleutian Islands as well. Sunday afternoon highs in southwest, getting up into the mid to upper 50s, and then into the lower to mid 50s for the Aleutians. Moving into Monday morning, dropping down to near 50 degrees for southwest Alaska, and into the mid to upper 40s for the Aleutians. Monday afternoon highs and southwest going to get up into the mid to upper 50s, a little bit cooler along the coastline, lower 50s there, mid 50s for the Alaska Peninsula, and lower 50s for the Aleutians, with 53 for St. Paul. Taking a look at our climate outlook, the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, we are expecting much of mainland Alaska to have higher chances to be below normal temperatures, near normal for south central Alaska and along the North Gulf Coast, and then chances to be above normal for the southern Panhandle. 8 to 14 day forecast is pretty similar, except those chances to be above normal have extended out over southwest Alaska. And then for precipitation outlook, we're looking at higher chances to be above normal along the west coast of the state.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
For aviation, we'll start off with a look at our flying weather on Sunday morning. Out over the Gulf of Alaska, we're seeing quite a bit of IFR that is extending into the Panhandle, and then MVFR along much of the North Gulf Coast into south central Alaska. Up in the interior, starting to see some VFR conditions, but MVFR and IFR conditions up along the North Slope and down the west coast nearest to the water. Out over the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, we're seeing widespread MVFR conditions with a lot of IFR as we get by the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula. Then on Sunday afternoon, those MVFR and IFR conditions out over the Bering and Aleutians are going to push farther to the east, extending into southwest Alaska, but the western Aleutian Islands should be VFR. Out over the Gulf of Alaska and Kodiak Island, we're seeing IFR conditions that are once again going to extend into the Panhandle area, and then primarily VFR conditions from south central Alaska through the interior and up through much of the North Slope area. Up along the far northern coastline up by Utqiagvik, we are going to see some MVFR conditions, and that's going to extend down some of the west coast as well. Then into Monday morning, a lot of IFR moving in from the west. We're going to see IFR throughout the central and eastern Bering Sea, much of the Aleutian Islands, and much of southwest Alaska, extending through the west coast as well. Up along the Arctic coastline, a mixture of VFR and IFR right along the water. And then in the interior, still primarily VFR conditions, but some of that IFR sneaking in from the west. And then MVFR through much of south central with IFR along the coastline. That's going to extend throughout the Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak Island, and the Panhandle. Once again, far out by the western Aleutian Islands, we are expecting to see VFR conditions. Then on Monday afternoon, a new system coming in, bringing some IFR to the western Aleutian Islands, and we are going to see more IFR throughout central and northern portions of the Bering Sea, including the Pribilof Islands, and IFR extending in from southwest Alaska through some of the western interior, the west coast, and up along many of the western locations of the North Slope. Eastern portions of the interior should be VFR, but we are going to see quite a bit of IFR moving into south central Alaska, IFR continuing to be out over the Gulf of Alaska, and northern portions of the Panhandle will see the IFR, but starting to clear up, and we'll see some MVFR for southern portions of the Panhandle. For our passes starting up north, AKwx should be VFR throughout the day on Sunday, as well as at Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill will start off marginal and then improve to VFR later in the day, as well as at Rainy Pass. Windy Pass, however, should be VFR throughout the day Sunday, as well as Isabel Pass and Mentasta Pass. Tanita will start off in VFR, improving to VFR in the afternoon, as well as at Portage. And Chilkoot and White should both be IFR throughout the day on Sunday. For our freezing levels, we are seeing some lower freezing levels out over the Bering Sea, getting down as low as 4,000 feet, but then picking up as we get closer to the Aleutian Islands, back up to 10 to 12,000 feet, with an area of warmer air out over the Gulf of Alaska up to 14,000 feet there. For our icing, with those lower freezing levels, we are seeing some icing out over the Bering and west coast, above 4,000 feet for much of the central and southern Bering, above 4,000 feet for much of the west coast as well, and then getting above 3,000 feet as we get up to the northwestern coastline. For our jet stream, we're seeing the strongest portion of the jet moving through the Aleutian Islands at 105 knots out of the west, and then as that progresses up the west coast and starts to shift to be more westerly over the northern portion of mainland Alaska, 105 knots there as well. Little jet streak down by Kodiak Island, southwesterly winds around 90 knots. Dropping down to 9,000 feet, we're going to see the strongest winds on the south side of the Bering Low, getting up to 50 to 60 knots south of the Aleutians, and then closer towards 45 knots as we get by the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. Dropping down to 40 to 45 knots over southwest Alaska out of a southwesterly direction. And then as the winds progress up the west coast, we're going to see southerly winds 25 knots for the Kotzebue Sound area. On the backside of this low, northerly winds 30 to 35 knots out over the central Bering and central Aleutian Islands. Then stronger winds out over the Gulf, 50 knots out of the west. And as we approach the Panhandle, we're going to see some of those stronger winds moving into the Panhandle as well, up to as high as 45 knots there out of that westerly direction. For 3,000-foot winds, we are going to see, once again, the strongest winds on the south side of our Bering Low. It's going to be south of the Alaska Peninsula, around 55 knots out of the southwest. Winds are going to move in over the Bristol Bay area out of a southerly direction, up to as high as 50 knots there, but dropping off pretty quick as we get over much of mainland Alaska. In the North Gulf coastline, we're going to see easterly winds at 30 knots there with a barrier jet. And then on the backside of our Bering Low out by the central Aleutian Islands, northerly winds up to as high as 45 knots. Taking us to our turbulence, we're going to have area below 3,000 feet for the central Aleutians, below 5,000 feet for the Alaska Peninsula extending into the western portion of Kodiak Island, and then below 6,000 feet for the North Gulf Coast and the northern Panhandle.
Ahoy, extra cadets! and welcome to the Okeanos Explorer. I'm Debbie, and I'm an ocean explorer. I work for NOAA, which stands for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Together with many other people, I work on this ship and we explore the deep sea. How do we do that? Let's go find out.
Octonauts, let's do this.
The pressure in the ocean is so great humans can't go there, so we send a special robot. Octocadets, meet Deep Discoverer, our special robot for ocean exploration. And this is Chris. He works with Deep Discoverer. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Debbie.
Can you tell us about what Deep Discoverer does?
Sure. So this is Deep Discoverer, and today we're going to take Deep Discoverer up to 4 miles down to the ocean floor so you can see what Deep Discoverer sees.
And how do we do that?
We do that by using these powerful cameras and powerful lights.
That's neat. And what is that?
And this is our manipulator arm, and we use this arm to take biological and geological samples that we store up front in these boxes, and so that we can bring them to the surface so scientists can analyze them.
Wow, isn't that cool, Octocadets? Wow! Now that we know more about the special robot that explores the seafloor, let's find out more about the ship. Octocadets, let's do this. Now let's find out what we do with D2's video. Come along. This is the control room. A lot of things about D2 happen in here. Behind me you see the pilots. They steer D2 on the seafloor. And over here we have scientists. Hi Steve and Stacy.
Hi, this is Steve and I'm Stacy and we are marine biologists.
Can you tell us about the work you do here?
We actually look at the videos collected by the robots and we try to identify organisms along with other scientists on the shore.
What are you looking at right now?
We're actually looking at a sea star.
That's so awesome, thank you. Now let's look at how we make maps of the seafloor.
Excellent, Quasi. A good map helps you to get to places you've never been.
We also have a scientist on board who makes maps of the seafloor. Hi Derek.
Hi, Debbie.
Can you tell us about your work?
Sure. My job on the ship is to make maps of the ocean floor. We do this by sending sound from the bottom of the ship. It echoes off the seafloor and comes back to the ship. And then from that, we can make maps like this. So this is what it would look like if you were able to drain the water out of the ocean and actually see what the landscape looked like down there. We use these maps to give the vehicles a place to dive, and they explore further, just like octonauts do.
Status report, Dashi.
We're right on course, Captain.
So earlier we learned that D2 picks things up from the seafloor with his manipulator arm. Let's find out what we do with those samples. This is the wet lab, and Megan spends a lot of time here. Megan, can you tell us about your work?
I am the sample data manager, so when the ROV comes up, we go out and we collect the samples from the ROV and we bring them in here. And we try to record as much information about them as possible, everything from the details about what they look like to the environment conditions where they were found. How cold was it, for example? Then we come in and we take imagery using this microscope, and we take pictures using this camera as well. And then after we get all the pictures taken and we're ready, we prepare them for shipping to other scientists and museums so more science can be done, such as the squat lobster, this cup coral as well.
And what is that?
This is a piece of coral, or several pieces of coral, that we think might actually be a new species. So we are going to send it out for a comparison to existing species to see if we discovered something new.
Wow, you have a really cool job.
Thank you.
Fascinating. I've read about this, but I've never actually seen it.
An important part of how we explore the ocean is keeping in touch with scientists and octocadets on shore. Let's go see how we do that. Rosemary, could you tell the octocadets a little about what that dish does?
Sure. My name is Lieutenant Rosemary Abbott. I'm the operations officer aboard the Okeanos Explorer, and that is our VSAT. It stands for Very Small Aperture Terminal, and inside that satellite dome is a very powerful dish antenna that allows us to communicate with shore and share video in real time. The technology is called telepresence.
Wow, that is so interesting. Thank you, Rosemary. Now I'm getting really hungry. Let's go to the kitchen and talk about food. This is the ship's kitchen, also known as the galley. And this is Michael. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Debbie.
Michael is the chief steward on this ship, and he keeps 49 people fed for 3 weeks at a time. Michael, how do you do that?
With a lot of care and with the help of 3 crew members. I have myself, the chief steward, a chief cook, and a second cook. And we just do it with a lot of love and care and make sure that everybody's happy and well fed. We use up to 150 dozen eggs per trip, up to 100 gallons of milk, a lot of veggies and fruits, a lot of snacks. Everybody's very pleased with what we usually put out. We also make sure that we do it in a loving way, in a sanitary way, in a safe way that keeps everybody from getting any tummy aches.
I'm about to enter the ship's bridge. It's like the Octopod's headquarters.
Octonauts to the HQ!
Ahoy, Captain!
Ahoy, Debbie.
Hi, Eric.
Hello.
Octocadets, meet Eric Johnson, the commander of the ship. Eric, can you tell us about what you do up here?
Absolutely. Hello, Octocadets. My name's Eric Johnson. I'm an Corps officer, and I'm the captain of the Okeanos Explorer. Welcome to my office. This is where we drive the ship. This is where we control the operations. We run the propellers that are underneath us in the back to the wheel up here at the front, which is where we steer. It's a pretty cool job. It's very exciting, and it's pretty beautiful around here as well.
So, Octocadets, now you know a little bit about the ship and how we explore the deep sea. I hope you enjoyed our time together. I'll see you next time.
Debbie, safety first.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back for the marine section of the forecast. We'll start off with a quick look at our ice edge. We're going to talk about first out west by the Chukchi Sea. You can see some of the ice in the western portions that has been moving southward about 15 nautical miles a day and is now only about 45 nautical miles from Diomede. Out east, we are seeing some of the ice making it south of Utqiagvik, but overall, especially in the eastern locations, we are seeing a melting and retreating pattern for the ice. Taking a look down in southeast Alaska in the inside water, south-southeast winds 20 to 25 knots, gusting in the central areas up to 40. Out over the Gulf waters, primarily a southerly flow, 25 to 30 knots, becoming more easterly up north up to as high as 35 knots. Then on Monday, dropping down a fair amount in most locations, 10 to 15 knots in the inside waters in the central and southern locations, and then south 20 as we get up by Lynn Canal. Out over the Gulf waters, west wind, primarily 10 to 15 knots, picking up to 20 knots by Craig, have a northwesterly direction, and in the far northern places of the Gulf, we're going to see southeasterly winds at 20 knots there. Out by south central Alaska, a east to northeast wind out over the Gulf, 30 to 35 knots. Northeast wind, 25 knots in Prince William Sound. Out over Cook Inlet area, northerly winds 20 to 25 knots, extending down by the areas west of the Barren Islands as well. Then on Monday, becoming much more southerly over much of the areas around south central, out over the Gulf, 20 to 25 knots. In Cook Inlet, 20 to 25 knots, and 20 knots out of the east for Prince William Sound. For the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island on Sunday, going to see winds around Kodiak Island on the eastern side out of the southwest at 20, and then out of the northeast as we get up through Shalikoff Strait up to as high as 25 knots. On the Pacific side of the peninsula, south winds 25 knots, and then on the Bering side, easterly winds 20 to 25 knots. On Monday, all winds becoming primarily west to southwest, 25 to 30 knots, seas up to as high as 11 feet around many of the locations around the peninsula and Kodiak Island. Sunday for the Aleutians, we're going to see primarily northerly winds for the central and western Aleutians, 25 knots by the central Aleutians, 15 to 20 knots by the western Aleutians, and then southerly winds by the eastern Aleutians, 20 to 25 knots. On Monday, winds out by the eastern Aleutians becoming westerly, 20 to 25 knots. Southwest winds for the central Aleutians, 15 knots. And then southerly winds, 20 knots for the western Aleutians. Along the west coast of the state, northerly winds on Sunday in northern locations only around 10 knots, but as we get by Nunavik Island, picking up to 25 knots, and by the Pribilof Islands, all the way up to 30 knots. St. Matthew Island will be down about 15 knots. Then on Monday, we are going to see winds becoming a lot more westerly in the southern locations for the Pribilof Islands as well as St. Matthew Island, 25 knots, and then 30 knots by Nunavik Island. As we move up by St. Lawrence Island, northerly winds expected 35 knots and 25 knots out of the southeast for the Northern Sound. Up along the Arctic coastline, easterly winds 15 knots, picking up to 20 knots as we move around the northwest portion of the state, and then down to 10 to 15 knots out of a north to northeast direction down through the Bering Strait. On Monday, winds picking up quite a bit here as well. Easterly winds 25 to 30 knots along the Arctic coastline, 30 knots out of the northeast along the northwest coast, and then down by the Bering Strait, northerly winds 25 to 35 knots, highest farther to the south. Taking a look at our weather for the remainder of tonight, we are expecting a low pressure system to continue to track east along the Aleutians. Will now be around the eastern Aleutian Islands for tonight, bringing rain through much of the southern and eastern portion of the Bering Sea, as well as the central and eastern Aleutians, extending out along the Alaska Peninsula towards southwest Alaska. Another system in the Gulf of Alaska is going to bring rain throughout the Gulf, including the North Gulf Coast. Heavy rain expected for the Panhandle, and then rain also for Kodiak Island. Interior portion of the state should be fairly dry tonight, but we will still see some lingering showers along much of the west coast, and then a mixture of rain and fog up along the Arctic coastline. As we move into Monday, our low that was out by the eastern Aleutians will push into the eastern portion of the Bering Sea, bringing rain throughout the central Aleutians into southwest Alaska and all the way up along the west coast of the state. Still some areas of fog lingering along the Arctic coastline. And as we look out over the Gulf, we are going to see our frontal system pushing through, bringing continued rain for Kodiak Island, the Gulf of Alaska, North Gulf Coast, and for the Panhandle. This low will continue to progress north throughout the night, and we'll start to bring some stronger winds to the Bristol Bay area and southwest coastline, and especially on Monday as it moves even farther north, we are going to see the potential for high surf on Monday and into Tuesday for a lot of areas along the west coast. We're going to see rain throughout much of mainland Alaska also on Monday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.